12,000 people were in the square below. Tina Turner saw all of them, but when she looked up, just once, at the wrong moment, or perhaps exactly the right one, she saw a child on a balcony with tears on her face. And Tina Turner, who had made 1,000 audiences cry, was not prepared for what it felt like to be seen doing it. It was July 8, 1987, and the venue was the Piazza Grande in Locarno, Switzerland, and the situation was unlike anything Tina Turner had encountered in 30 years of performing. The stage had been built in the middle of the street, not beside it, not near it. In it, the center of the old town square given over entirely to the production, the cobblestones disappearing beneath the rigging and the speaker towers, and the lights that would, in a few hours, turn the ancient square into something that had never existed before in that space. The apartment buildings that lined the Piazza Grande rose on every side, their balconies facing inward toward the stage like theater boxes that had been there for centuries, waiting for exactly this. Tina Turner had seen the square during soundcheck in the afternoon. She had stood at the microphone in the flat light of a Swiss summer afternoon and looked up at the balconies, at the windows and the flower boxes and the laundry lines, and the ordinary domestic surfaces of buildings that had been standing in this square for 200 years. And she had felt something she did not have a simple word for. Not nerves. She had not experienced nerves in the conventional sense for a long time. Something else. The specific feeling of a performer who has understood, in a new way, what the room is. This was not a room. This was a town. She was going to perform inside someone's town, inside the place where people woke up and made coffee and argued with their children and hung out their washing and went to sleep. The stage was in their street. She had performed in stadiums that held 180,000 people. She had performed at Wembley and at the Maracana and at the Forum and at Madison Square Garden and at every configuration of arena and amphitheater and open field that the touring industry had developed in the second half of the 20th century. She knew how to read a room, how to feel the size of it, how to calibrate what the space required, how to adjust the performance to the specific acoustics and dimensions and energy of each particular place. She had been doing this since she was a teenager in East St. Louis, since the small clubs where the stages were barely platforms and the audience was close enough to reach out and touch. She knew rooms. She did not know what to do with a town. The show began at 9 in the evening, when the light had gone and the Piazza Grande was dark except for the production lighting that turned the old square into something between a concert and a dream. 12,000 people filled the space, pressed against the barriers near the stage and spreading back through the square and out into the surrounding streets where the sound carried and the overflow crowd stood and listened to what they could not quite see. The apartment buildings rose around them on all sides, their windows lit from within, their balconies occupied. The balconies were full of people. Not concert-goers, not people who had bought tickets and made their way to the Piazza Grande through the summer evening. The people on the balconies were the people who lived there, the residents of the apartments that surrounded the square, who had not chosen to attend a concert on the evening of July 8, 1987, but who had found, when they looked out their windows, that the concert had come to them. Parents who had meant to put their children to bed and had found the children at the railing instead, faces turned downward toward the lit stage and the vast crowd and the sound that was moving through the warm night air of a Swiss summer in a way that made going to bed seem beside the point. On one of these balconies, on the second floor of a building on the south side of the Piazza Grande, a 7-year-old girl stood at the railing in her nightgown. Her name was not important to the story. She was one child among many children on many balconies on that particular evening. And what happened to her alone, in the private interior of a 7-year-old who was standing in the dark in her nightgown, watching something she did not have the language to describe. Her mother was behind her, one hand on the child's shoulder, the other holding a glass of wine she had stopped drinking because the music had made the wine seem like an interruption. Her father had gone back inside at some point, she was not sure when, and it was just the two of them now, the mother and the daughter, at the railing in the warm dark, looking down at the lit stage where Tina Turner was. The child had not heard of Tina Turner before that evening. She was 7 years old, and she lived in Locarno, and her musical education had consisted to that point of the things that the musical education of a 7-year-old in a Swiss town in 1987 consisted of. Folk songs learned at school, the radio in the kitchen, the occasional record her parents played on Sunday afternoons. She did not know what a Tina Turner was. She knew only what she could see from the balcony, a woman on a stage below, surrounded by light and sound, and the particular electric atmosphere of 12,000 people who had come specifically to be in this woman's presence. She watched. Tina Turner moved across the stage the way Tina Turner had always moved, with the specific physical authority of someone whose body has been performing for 30 years and has stopped asking permission from anything. The heels, the fringe, the hair, the arms that reached and the legs that moved, and the voice that climbed above everything else and kept climbing. Always finding the higher register, always reaching for the thing that the lower register could not reach. The crowd below responded the way crowds responded to Tina Turner, with the particular collective surrender of people who have been in the presence of something that is larger than what they came prepared for. The child at the railing watched all of it. She watched with the complete, undistracted attention of a 7-year-old who has not yet learned to pretend to feel less than she feels, who has not yet acquired the adult habit of moderating her response to things in order to appear appropriately composed. She felt everything that the music sent up to the balcony, the sound moving through the warm air and arriving in her small body the way weather arrives, without asking. She felt it in her chest first, then in her throat, then, without understanding why, without any decision to do so, without any warning that it was coming, she began to cry. Not loudly, not in the way that draws attention. The specific, private crying of a child who is being moved by something and does not know what to do about it. The tears coming quietly, steadily, while she kept her face turned toward the stage and her hands on the railing, because stopping watching was not something she was capable of doing. Her mother noticed. She looked down at her daughter's face in the dark and saw the tears and felt, in the specific way of a mother who has been watching her child's face for 7 years and knows every expression it makes, that this was not distress crying. It was not the crying of a child who is hurt or frightened or wants something she cannot have. It was something else, something the mother had felt herself, standing at the railing with the wine forgotten in her hand. The something that the music was doing to the warm air of the Piazza Grande, and that the warm air was carrying up to the balconies and into the people standing at them. She put her hand on her daughter's shoulder and said nothing. On the stage below, Tina Turner was midway through the set. She had been performing for almost an hour, and the hour had done what hours of performing in a place like the Piazza Grande do. It had changed the nature of the evening, shifted it from event to something more like experience. The crowd below no longer watching a concert, but inhabiting one. The music no longer something being delivered to them, but something they were inside of. Tina Turner had felt this change happen. She always felt it. The specific moment when the performance stops being something she is doing and becomes something they are doing together. When the transaction becomes a conversation. When the giving and the receiving find their equilibrium and the whole thing lifts. She was in the lifted place when she looked up. It was not a planned gesture. There was nothing choreographed about it. It was simply what happened when a performer who has spent 30 years learning how to read a room looked up and registered, for the first time that evening, the balconies. She had known they were there. She had seen them during sound check. But in the way of performers who are deep inside a performance, she had not been seeing them the way she had seen them in the afternoon. She had been seeing the 12,000 people in front of her, the immediate crowd, the sea of faces that a performer navigates and reads and responds to. She looked up, and in the second-floor balcony of a building on the south side of the Piazza Grande, she saw a child, a small child in what appeared to be a nightgown. Because from the stage, even with the production lighting, even with the crowd and the heat and the distance, a child in a white nightgown standing at a dark balcony railing was visible in the way that specific, incongruous details are visible in a complex scene. The child was standing very still, one hand on the railing, and her face, even from that distance, even across the 12,000 people and the sound and the heat, her face was wet. Tina Turner kept singing. She did not stop. She did not pause. The performance continued in the way that performances continue, because the machinery of a show that size does not stop for a single detail noticed in the third bar of a song. But something changed in the quality of her attention. She was still singing to 12,000 people, and she was also, separately and simultaneously, singing to a child on a balcony who was crying in her nightgown at 11 o'clock at night in Locarno, Switzerland. She had made audiences cry before. She had made audiences cry in stadiums and arenas and theaters and small clubs and church halls and every other space in which she had performed in 30 years. She had seen, from stages, the faces of people who had been moved past the point of composure, who had arrived at a concert with their emotions in the usual arrangement and found, somewhere in the middle of the set, that the usual arrangement had been disturbed. She knew what it looked like. She had always known it was happening, always felt it as part of the exchange of the evening, part of what the music was for. She had never, in 30 years, been undone by it. There was something about the child. Not the crying itself, she had seen crying before from stages many times. It was the specific circumstances of it, the nightgown, the hour, the fact that the child had not come to a concert, had not chosen to be here, had not prepared herself for whatever was about to happen to her, had not made the adult decision to go to a venue and submit herself to the experience. She had simply been in her apartment on a summer evening, and the music had come through the window and found her on the balcony and done to her, without permission, what it had always done to people when they were not defended against it. The music had gone inside her. It had found something there, something in a 7-year-old in Locarno that Tina Turner had not known was findable, had not thought to look for, had not aimed at. The sound had simply climbed from the stage and traveled through the warm night air and arrived at a second-floor balcony and entered a child who had no defenses against it. And whatever it found there had been worth finding. Because the child was crying in the specific way of someone who has been touched somewhere they did not know could be touched. Tina Turner kept singing, but something had shifted in her. The way things shift when you understand, suddenly and with new clarity, the nature of what you are doing. She had understood this before. She had understood it many times, in many rooms, over 30 years. The understanding she had reached at 8 years old in a church in Nutbush, Tennessee, when an old woman had cried at a hymn and told her what had happened. Your voice went inside me. That understanding had been with Tina Turner every night, on every stage, in every city. It was the thing she carried. But understanding a thing and being shown it are different. On July 8, 1987, in the Piazza Grande in Locarno, Switzerland, with 12,000 people in the square below and a child on a second-floor balcony in a nightgown, Tina Turner was shown it. Not told, not reminded. Shown. In the specific, undeniable way that you are shown something when the evidence of it is standing at a railing 12 meters above you, small and still and wet-faced, completely unaware that she has just demonstrated something that 30 years of performing had not, until that moment, made quite so visible. The show ended. The crowd below did what crowds do at the end of a Tina Turner concert. They made the sound that signals that they do not want it to end. The sustained roar of 12,000 people expressing a collective reluctance to return to the world that exists outside the concert. Tina Turner took her bow. She took it the way she always took it, with the specific grace of someone who has been doing this for 30 years and knows the choreography of endings, the protocol of departure. The way you leave a stage so that the leaving becomes part of the performance. She looked up at the balcony one more time. The child was still there. The mother had both hands on the child's shoulders now, and the child's face was still turned toward the stage, and the crying had stopped, but the face still held its traces, the way faces hold the traces of things for a while after the things have passed. The child was not looking at Tina Turner specifically. She was looking at the stage in the way that you look at a place where something happened to you, with the specific attention of someone who is not yet sure what occurred, who is still in the middle of processing something that their experience has not yet given them the tools to process. Tina Turner stood at the edge of the stage for a moment. Not long. Not in a way that the crowd could identify as anything other than the normal pause of a performer at the end of a set. But long enough for her to look at the child on the balcony and feel, one more time, the things she had been feeling since the middle of the performance. The specific weight of being seen doing something, by someone who has no reason to pretend. The child on the balcony was not a fan. She was not there because she had bought a ticket, not there because she loved the music, not there because she had arrived with any expectation of what the evening would do to her. She was there because she lived on the second floor of a building in the Piazza Grande, and the music had come through her window, and she had gone to look, and it had found her. She had received something without choosing to receive it. She had been moved without choosing to be moved. She had cried at a concert she had not attended, for music she had not known, from a performer whose name she did not yet know. That, Tina Turner thought, standing at the edge of the stage in the warm night air of Locarno, was what the music was for. Not for the 12,000 below. Not for the stadiums and the arenas and the Grammys and the chart positions and all the things that the career had become and would continue to be. For this. For the child in the nightgown who had been found by something she was not looking for and had not been able to defend against it, and had cried because there was nothing else to do when a thing that size arrives in you, and you are 7 years old, and it is 11 o'clock at night, and you do not yet know how to pretend that you are not feeling what you are feeling. Tina Turner walked off the stage. She walked through the wing and through the production corridor and into the space behind the stage where her people were waiting. The tour manager and the dancers and the band and the various members of the production who had made this particular night in this particular town square possible. They were waiting for her the way they always waited, with the specific attentive energy of people who have just been part of something large and are not yet sure where to put it. She did not tell them about the child. Not that evening. She held it the way she held certain things, the small, specific, private moments that did not belong to the public version of the performance, but to something else. Something older, the part of the work that had nothing to do with the industry, and everything to do with what she had understood in a church in Nutbush at 8 years old, and had been carrying ever since. She held it the way you hold the things that remind you why. The child on the balcony in Locarno grew up. She grew up in the Piazza Grande apartment and left Locarno for Zurich and then for other places, the way young people leave the places they grew up in for the larger places that call to them. She grew up not knowing who Tina Turner was, or rather, knowing the name eventually, the way you come to know names, without connecting it to the woman on the stage on the July evening when she was 7 years old, and something had arrived in her through the warm summer air and made her cry. She connected it much later. She was an adult, 30, 35, somewhere in the accumulation of years that makes a life, when she heard a Tina Turner song and felt something that was not quite memory but was adjacent to it, something in the body rather than the mind, a recognition that lived in the chest rather than in the conscious recollection. She did not immediately know what it was. It took her a moment. The specific moment of reaching back through years for something that had not been stored as a fact, but as a feeling. And then she remembered. The balcony, the nightgown, the warm night, the stage below with the woman on it, and the sound that had come up through the air and entered her before she had any chance to decide whether to let it in. The crying that she had not understood at the time and did not fully understand even now, except that it had been real. The realest thing she had felt on that particular evening. The thing that had nothing performed about it, nothing chosen, nothing decided. She had been found. That was what she remembered. Standing on the balcony in Locarno at 7 years old, in the middle of a Tuesday evening in July, she had been found by something she was not looking for. And it had been, she knew this now, standing in the middle of her adult life with the Tina Turner song still in the air. It had been worth finding. Tina Turner died on May 24, 2023, in Küsnacht, Switzerland. She had lived the last years of her life in a house above a lake, in the country where, on a July evening in 1987, she had looked up from a stage in an old town square and seen a child on a balcony who was crying in her nightgown. She had never spoken publicly about that specific moment. It belonged to the private inventory of things that had confirmed, over 30 years of performing, what she had always believed the music was for. She had believed it at 8 years old in Nutbush. She had believed it on the stage at the Piazza Grande in Locarno, looking up at a balcony. She had believed it on every stage in between, and on every stage after, and on the last stage of all in Sheffield in May 2009, when she had put her hand against the wall and said thank you to all of it. She had believed it because she had seen the evidence of it, on 10,000 nights, in 10,000 rooms, in every city she had ever sung in. The evidence was always the same. The evidence was always a face that had received something, a face that had been found. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who deserves to hear it today. Subscribe for more stories about the human beings behind music's greatest legends, the small moments, the balconies, the children in nightgowns who were found by something they weren't looking for. And if Tina Turner's voice ever found something inside you that you had forgotten was there, tell us about it in the comments. Hit the notification bell so you never miss one of these stories.